Good morning, friends. I am so excited to share this interpretation of my theological approach to pastoral care and counseling. This has been a wonderful semester of exploring and challenging embedded ideas and theologies for the sake of improving our ability to relate to individuals and communities on a spiritual and pastoral level. I've attempted to capture that in this wood burning, and I want to take a minute to explain some of the meaning behind it, as well as some of the metaphors that occurred to me as I was creating it from the media and the techniques I was using. But there are three distinct elements to the piece. This upper circle is meant to represent individual relationships and the journey those relationships take. The larger outer circle represents the larger world and cultures in which we live. And this base level represents the divinity that dwells within and holds us all. So this first level was inspired not as much by one of our texts from this semester, but by John Donahue's book Anam Cara, which explores the various expressions in the Celtic tradition of spiritual friendship. Now it has come to be a good model for me for pastoral care as well as for spiritual direction. And the two figures shown here are navigating the thorns and thistles and raw branches of life in what is intended to be a spiritually intimate and personal way, caring for each other along the journey. And while it's been wonderful to explore the various specific cultures and ideologies that impact our modality of pastoral care, from starting the semester with Wimberley and African American culture, to Dr. Lightsey and her thoughts on queer theology, or in the last few weeks with Lardy and looking at post-colonial thought. The biggest takeaway I've had from the overall work in the course is that culture and context matters. It's important that we get to know an individual parishioner and how they are relating to the world around them and how their culture may have impacted their way of thinking about God and about themselves. So the symbols that show up on this ring as it spins represent our world in terms of the phases of the moon, the seasons of the year, and the elements, water, earth, fire, and air, that shape and mold the universe that surrounds us. And it's also important that we realize that individuals are a product of the culture they're in. To understand the individual, we must at some level understand the culture. And while that is true, it's also very important to recognize that we as pastors are not simply pastors to individuals, but pastors to communities. As much as the individual is a product of the culture, those communities and the cultures that emanate from them are the cumulative product of all the individuals living and working in that culture. By engaging with the individual in the spiritual journey, we potentially have an impact on the overall culture that individual is feeding. Finally, we recognize that our engagement doesn't stop with the perceivable world. It also includes the unseen divinity both within and surrounding us. We are all being held by the hands of God. And this is a major function of pastoral care or spiritual direction is to help those we engage with experience those hands, experience divinity in as many ways as possible. So while I was creating the piece, a couple of things that I noticed that kind of stuck out as metaphors of all of this. First, I really enjoy using reclaimed woods. Now, these two particular pieces of wood came out of, were once cedar siding on a barn out in South Dakota. And engaging with wood that is aged and seasoned represents a completely different challenge than engaging with fresh, less textured wood like the stuff purchased from a store. Now, the temptation is to sand the wood down and make it smooth and uniform again, but in doing that, you completely lose the character that only age and exposure to the elements can bring. Part of the art for me is engaging with that wood in a way that you can bring out the character of the wood without attempting to alter it for the sake of my own comfort and ease. I feel like this serves as a great metaphor for engaging with different personalities, regardless of their age or experience or where they are in a pastoral care context. Another technique that I've been working on is defining an element by first burning the shadows. Now, this is most easily seen in certain places along the hands, where I never actually create a line for the hands, but just rather create the shadow that the hand is casting. You can also see it in the folds of the dresses for the girls. Now, writers on everything from spiritual direction to pastoral care and psychology, such as Thomas Merton or Richard Rohr or Carl Jung, all have their own interpretation of what it means to understand ourselves in terms of our shadows. And not simply thinking of shadows as dark, unwanted places, but as a natural part of who we are as we sit exposed to any light. And while it's true that shadows can hide certain pieces of us, it's also true that the shadow of a tree becomes the shade of a hot day. I think it's important as pastoral caregivers or spiritual directors that we be willing and able to explore the shadows of people around us and to help them learn to love and appreciate them. Once again, this has been a wonderful semester, and I so very much look forward to taking everything that we've discussed and contemplated here into the field with me. And I don't say this about everything that I make, but this piece is probably going to end up on an office wall somewhere for me as a wonderful reminder of all of the things that it has come to mean. In the meantime, and for all time, the light and love in me sees and honors the light and love in each of you. Peace and be well, my friends. Thank you.